Dadbodhistory.
Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of Dad Bod History. It's just Jake tonight, and I wanted to talk to you about a little man. You may have heard of him. His name is Hercules. And the reason I want to talk about him today is because when I think about Hercules, and when most people think about Hercules, they think about the mythology, right? The stories. And like, we all know he was incredibly strong. Most of us know that he was the son of Zeus. But outside of that, what do we know about him? What's his mythology? Like, what's the story of Hercules? And when you look at Hercules, and frankly, when you look at most Greek heroes and most Greek stories, be it the gods, the titans, the heroes, or just, normal humans, so to speak, it's kind of hard to pinpoint and like find one book where it says, this is the mythology of ancient Greece, because the mythology of ancient Greece spans thousands of years. Greece, specifically Hercules, existed in the time of the Trojan War, which some think was about 1000 to 1600 BC, whereas the Spartans at Thermopylae were 486 BC. That's a 1,000-year gap between two of the most noticeable or recognizable events in Greek history, the invasion of the Persians and the Battle of Thermopylae in 486, and then the great hero Hercules, and before him, an Achilles and Perseus and Theseus. So it's kind of hard to take all that and say, well, what's the mythology? What's the story of ancient Greece? And what makes it even more difficult, especially the farther back you go in Greek history, is that before what we consider classical Greece and the time of the Spartans at Thermopylae and the rise of Athens and the great thinkers of Plato and Herodotus, who wrote the first history. A lot of the stories that were told were told, they were oral, they weren't written down, and so they were things that were passed down from one generation to the next. Homer himself, the famous author of the Odyssey and the Iliad, some think he wasn't even an actual person, but he was more of an idea. And the story of the Iliad and the Odyssey was an oral tradition that had been passed down for generations until it was eventually written down as the story, the books that we know it today. And to that point, Hercules falls right in that. Hercules is at the Battle of Troy. He's in the Iliad. But that's not his whole story. And I think that's what makes it really interesting and really hard to understand who Hercules was. Like, what is his story? And so I did a little research for my own personal benefit, and I found this book, and it's called The Library, and it's written by an author named Apollodorus, and he was around the 1st century BC. And what he was is he was a mythographer. And what a mythographer is, it's kind of like a historian. He takes all the stories, all the legends, the myths, the stories of the gods and the titans, and he tries to put them down in sort of a sequential, ordered form. And what makes his story, what makes his book so great is that Apollodorus was able to kind of say, all right, like in the Bible, the book of Genesis is the beginning of the Judeo-Christian books, right? And it tells about the history of the universe and the beginning of the world and the creation of mankind to their eventual fall and then the promise of a savior. Well, similarly, Apollodorus took the stories, those oral traditions, and took what written works he had, and he compiled them all together. And he was able to compile them, and he specifically was able to compile a lot of stuff about the story of Hercules. And so what I want to talk to you about, and this is going to be a multi-part series, is Hercules' 12 great labors. And when people think about who he is, whether they know it or they don't know it, they're talking about, they're referencing those labors. And And so I want to go through that a little bit with you guys. But before I get into the labors, let's figure out who Hercules was. Where did he come from? And so, as I said before, he was a son of Zeus. Zeus had a somewhat prodigious habit of sleeping with mortal women. And he had several kids by these means, Theseus and Perseus, for example. Well, Hercules was another one of those sons of Zeus, so to speak, and he was a half-god, half-man, a demigod. And so Zeus met a woman named Alcmene, and she was married to a king named Amphitryon, and Zeus disguised himself as Alcmene, or as Amphitryon, and slept with Alcmene. And Amphitryon had slept with her as well, and she became pregnant with two sons. One was Hercules, and one was Iphicles. And so Hercules his father was Zeus. Iphicles, his father was Amphitryon, and Zeus, part of the problem with Zeus's prodigious philandering was that his goddess wife, Hera, was well aware of his proclivities, and she did not take kindly to Hercules, him being the seed of Zeus and a mortal woman. And so what she did, and I'd like to read a passage to you, it says, "The infant Hercules and the snake." So here's one of his first stories. "When Hercules was 8 months old, Hera sent 2 enormous serpents into his bed because she wanted to destroy the infant. Alcmene called to Amphitryon for help, but Hercules stood up at 8 months old, throttled them, one in each hand, and killed them. But Heracles said that Amphitryon," and so another story that Apollodorus has is, but Heracles says, so this was another historian, said Amphitryon, wishing to know which of the boys was his son, put the serpents into the bed. When Iphicles fled and Heracles confronted them, Amphitryon knew that Iphicles was his. So there's 2 stories of the infant Hercules. The first one being Hera, as jealous, as a fit of jealousy and revenge towards Zeus, put the serpents into Hercules and Hephaestus's bed. Hercules stood up at 8 months old, strangled one in each hand, and throttled them to death. Not too bad for a child. But what you'll see is early on, there's this enmity between Hera and Hercules, and that continues throughout his story. And it's actually what leads to his great labors. So I wanted to give you like a little taste of that. And then I'll just tell you again, there are some other things. Hercules grew up, his boyhood and education. He was taught to wrestle Autolycus. His stepfather taught him how to drive chariots, Amphitryon. He was taught how to shoot a bow by Eurytos, to fight in armor by Castor, who was another demigod sort of person, Castor and Pollux, the twins, and to play the lyre by Linos, who was Orpheus's brother. So he had all these great teachers in all these forms of war and art. And he was actually sent away by Amphitryon because he killed Linos, because Linos had struck him as a means of discipline. But the point is, Hercules grew up, and he was excellent at everything he did. He was a master of war. He could play the lute. He was 6 feet tall. It says his body was 4 cubits tall, so he's about 6 feet, maybe a little bit taller. And he had a fiery radiance that shone from his eyes. And he also did not miss when he shot a bow or threw a javelin. So all these things told people that, yes, this is Zeus's son. You can see Zeus in the boy. And so what happened is Hercules went on, he went on a hunt, killed a lion, the Cytheronian lion, and, which was terrorizing the Greeks at the time. He killed it, and he made his mantle. He wore the lion's head as kind of his mantle. So if you see a lot of images of Hercules, you'll see this lion sort of mantle and the skin going down his shoulders. This was the Cytheranian lion. Another thing he did was he marched against Thebes. He was given armor and weapons from Athena, and then he got married, and he married a woman named Megara as a prize for his bravery. And him and Megara had 3 sons. And what happened is Hercules was, he's kind of done doing his heroism. He wanted to settle down, be a family man. And then he married Megara, had his 3 sons. And then Hera interferes again. And it says, Hercules' madness. And so after his battle against the minions, not the minions, not the sidekicks from Despicable Me, it happened that Hercules was driven mad because of the jealousy of Hera. Again, as punishment for Zeus's proclivities, she punished Hercules. Really, she should have taken it out on Zeus. And Hercules, he threw his own children by Megara into a fire, along with 2 of Iphicles' sons. And for this he condemned himself to exile. So Hera drove him mad. He killed his kids. Other accounts say that he killed his wife as well. But Apollodorus says that Megara didn't die, just the children. And eventually he was purified by Thespios, and he went to the oracle at Delphi to ask for counsel. He had put himself in exile after the madness had passed. And he said, he went to Delphi, and he said, where should I go for my exile? And Pythia, the god at Delphi, then named him for the first time Hercules. So it was actually his given name was Alcides, which means strength. But the oracle at Delphi renamed him Hercules, which means the glory or the pride of Hera. So it's kind of a slap in Hera's face that this one that you've tried to bring down will be your undoing, a thorn in your side, so to speak. And she told him to settle in Tyrians and serve Eurystheus, his cousin. Hercules and Eurystheus were cousins. Their grandfather was Perseus, the famous Greek hero Perseus. She also told him to accomplish 10 labors opposed upon him for 12 years and said that when the labors were finished, he would become immortal. So as punishment, as part of his penance for killing his family, he had to serve his cousin who did not like him and who Hera liked Eurystheus. He did not like either of those two. He did not like Hera. He did not like Eurystheus. So he had to serve him for 12 years, and he had performed 10 labors, 10 tasks. And then once he did, his penance, so to speak, would be over, and then he'd be granted immortality. He would go to Mount Olympus and never die. And so that's kind of the setup for Hercules. And what we're going to do over several videos is I'm going to break each one down, each of the 12 labors. It starts out as 10, but it becomes 12, and you'll see why. But I just want to break them down and like explain kind of this mythos and of who he was and the great things that he accomplished and why he accomplished them and the things that happened along the way. And I just think it's a fascinating story, and I think the more we get into it, the better it's going to be. And feel free to, as we're going through this kind of this adventure, this investigation into who Hercules was, feel free to send, on our channel, or send me a question, a comment, and say, well, what about this? Or I heard Hercules did this, and I will be happy to look into that for you and answer it on the next video. Again, this is Jake with dadbodhistory, and I look forward to digging into the labors of Hercules with you guys. Feel free to like, subscribe, follow, and I'll see you all next time.